Hey everyone, I'm here in Christchurch, New Zealand today with the Head of Emergency Management for Christchurch City Council, Brenden Winder. Brenden, thanks so much for coming along today. You've been involved in pretty much every disaster, floods, bushfires, and of course earthquakes. Is there any disaster you haven't dealt with?
Yeah, there's a couple, and I'm pretty happy that I haven't been involved in a tsunami or a volcano yet,
Not yet, at
but
least,
we're
yeah.
planning for that.
Well, let's take a walk around the city and see what we can find.
So this was pretty close to ground zero for some of the major damage in the city. You'll see over my left shoulder there a pretty significant building, and it's changed ownership over the last few years, but that was a pretty big office block. Inside that building the stairwell collapsed, and thankfully no one was on the stairwell when it happened, but it left a whole heap of people in the building that needed to be rescued, and there was some pretty interesting stories about how that was done. People trying to get from story to story inside the building, also outside of the building, and you can see there how they would do that. So, you know, in this little area here, a whole heap of different things happened. New buildings didn't do so well, old buildings did do okay. And I guess the lesson from that is earthquakes are indiscriminate. Just because a building's designed in a particular way doesn't mean it's going to necessarily react in a way that everyone predicts. So this is one of the effects of an earthquake in a city. Sites like this have been left largely unattended for a long time, and you know, I think everyone can appreciate this is not what we want our city to look like, but there's some complex legal and other issues that need to be figured out, and the sooner that happens the better.
So I'm keen to ask you about the buybacks and areas that people were advised of the risks. They were told it's going to be dangerous. There was a lot of liquefaction and their houses were damaged. How did that unfold? What happened with the buybacks, and where are we at with that now?
So I guess probably the best place to start in terms of context is there's three red zones primarily in Christchurch. There was a CBD red zone where we are currently, and there wasn't a buyback scheme here as such. In the flatlands of Christchurch and the eastern suburbs, there was again a willing buyer, willing seller offer made to those properties that were affected largely by liquefaction, and a separate but similar scheme used in the Port Hills of Christchurch. Those areas, it was very apparent to the scientists and the engineers that there was risk there, but also the cost of remediating that risk was going to be enormous, and that would have fallen to the individual landowners. And we know for sure that much of that work would have been massively complex, would have taken huge engineering effort, would have taken many years, would have involved the demolition of thousands of properties with no real assurance that those remediation efforts were going to be comprehensive enough to work. So the government stepped in and made an offer to the people that lived in that area, and you know, a vast majority of those people took that offer up, but at no stage was it compulsory. There are still some people who are living on the edges and even in the red zone who chose not to take that offer, and fair play to them. That was their decision, and over time, you know, some of those people have changed their mind, but over time some of those people have decided to stay as well. Yeah, look, the community volunteering effort and the community effort overall was amazing. Some quite high profile volunteering efforts, the Student Volunteer Army and the Farming Army, of course, people are pretty well aware of those, and they did an amazing job. There was a whole heap of other people that did a lot of volunteering as well. I met my wife here in Christchurch, and she was a volunteer in one of the light rescue teams. And they spent weeks walking around the city and out in the suburbs, making sure that the houses hadn't had people collapse in them, and they were in there looking for people to make sure they were okay. The role of spontaneous volunteers in emergencies is often understated. It's absolutely critical. It is from very early relief and rescue all the way through recovery. We rely on the goodwill, expertise and effort of volunteers. We are really conscious that volunteers will organically deploy find their own work to do and go out and do that. And in the emergency management sector, we don't want to stifle that at all. What we would ask though is that they let us know what they're doing, and we can often help them with making sure it's safe and the work is going on in a coordinated manner. But by no means do we want to start dictating to volunteers what they can and can't do. That is, well, in New Zealand they won't listen anyway. Having been involved in a couple of big emergencies, this one, the biggest one by miles, I have learned a lot. A couple of sort of personal observations. These big events are pervasive. They'll take over every part of your life. So self-care is hugely important. For months on end, we were doing 18-hour days, often more than that. And that's unsustainable, and you're not making good decisions. But you also feel really compelled to help, so it's hard to walk away from it. You'll also make mistakes, because there's so many moving parts, and you're writing policy in the morning and enacting it in the afternoon and reviewing it that evening. There's so many moving parts that you can't get strung out if things don't go well on a particular day. You need to have some sort of built-in resilience mechanism that allows you to have a bad day and keep going. It's certain an earthquake will happen again. The Alpine fault goes off with metronomic regularity about every 300 years. It's now been 307 years since the last one, so literally the clock is ticking. But the Alpine fault's a couple of 100k away from us here, and our modelling suggests that the earthquake will be significant. It'll be very significant for the South Island of New Zealand. It'll be less significant here in Christchurch. It will create some damage for sure, but probably not to the same extent as last time. And one of the benefits of having the city already get knocked around by an earthquake in 2011 is a large amount of our building stock's now in good shape. So if we do have the Alpine fault earthquake go off anytime soon, a large part of the city will actually respond really well, we think, given it's been strengthened a whole lot. To my previous comment, we don't know exactly how each building will respond, but we're more confident that more buildings will be in better shape.
Thanks for joining us here in Christchurch on Australia and New Zealand's leading disaster channel. Be sure to like, share and subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time.